Hey, my name is Caleb. I'm on the College Age Ministry team at the Blankenbaker campus.
Hey, my name is Brianna, and I'm on the College Age team at our South Louisville campus.
We are going to be talking about the young adult and college age season of life, and we want to be encouraging and helpful for you. Brianna, how are you doing?
I'm so good.
Good.
How are you?
Good. I'm great.
Good.
I'm great. What are you drinking? What's your coffee?
Just coffee with creamer.
Nice.
Oat milk,
Oh, I like that.
A lot of
sugar. Oat milk is an underrated additive to coffee. Good.
What do you have coffee?
I'm drinking water, staying hydrated. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Hey, I'm excited about what we're talking about.
Me too. It'll be
People
fun.
we care about.
Yeah.
Because we have, at this season, dedicated our life to 18 to 25-year-olds, young adults, college age. Mm-hmm. So what's some of the stuff you hope that this conversation does for them? What do you think?
I hope, honestly, that people just feel less alone. I think there's such in the young adult, post-college, whatever season of life, it truly feels like everybody has it figured out but you, which is just not true. So I hope people just can resonate with what we say and know that they're definitely not alone in that.
Yeah. The word loneliness, I don't know about you. If I'm in a room with young adults and I say, hey, loneliness, I see heads nodding. Yes.
Yeah.
Like recognition.
Yes.
I know what that is like, the feeling of loneliness.
Yeah.
And so why do you think that is for so many people? Post-high school, in college, post-college, why do they feel so lonely? What do you think?
Gosh, I feel like it's a million things. Obviously, social media is a huge part of that. And you had said something the other day when we were talking about, you go through life, even as a kid, and you're in proximity to people.
Like built-in relationships.
Yes, built-in friendships, whether it's by your hobby or your activity or just things that you do, even class, like stuff like that. So you're just around people, and all of a sudden, whether you're out of school or you're in a workplace, not necessarily with people your age, you're like, how do I do this? Where do I start?
Yeah. I think sometimes in terms of people know how to be a friend, they don't know how to build friendship.
Yeah.
So I've used this metaphor in my brain. It's like the high school experience relationally is like this cafeteria. You walk in and things are prepared and you get to just kind of select it metaphorically. Oh, my friends are my teammates. My friends are my classmates.
Right.
Then you finish high school or you finish college, or the college years are just chaos. And you're like, where are my people at? Like, and what do I do? And it feels less like a cafeteria and more like someone threw you in a grocery store and you don't know what to purchase, let alone how to go home and prepare a meal for yourself.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, the end result is, man, I'm lonely. And then they're asking this question like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So what have you found? Like if someone comes to you and they're like, Brianna, I'm lonely. Like, I don't know really what to do about this. What do you find yourself often that conversation goes towards?
Yeah. I think we always want to jump to the practical, which is important. And we're definitely going to talk about that. But I think it is so important to start with, have you leaned into the Lord with that? And what do we mean by lean in? That's one of those just words. And I think have you been able to take those emotions or those feelings or the fears and the doubts or the insecurities even and bring that to the Lord in a very real way and be like, God, this is genuinely where I'm at right now. And that sounds like something we just don't really think about, or we're like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Like I've prayed about it. And it's like, no, really in an unfiltered way, express to the Lord, and see what he does in that and even believe him and ask him, man, God, like, can you bring me friends?
Yeah.
Can you bring me people in my life? And can you even give me wisdom on like where to start?
Yeah.
Or what to do?
It's like there's these choices they need to make, but some of the barriers are actually more internal than they are external.
Yeah.
It's fear. It's insecurity. It's that feeling of, man, I'm not like even aware of who I am. So how am I supposed to project something out into the world? And then they overthink everything. And so, it really does seem like it's, man, learning to give some of those things over to the Lord before you even take some of those big, steps.
Yeah. So that you can be free when you do, like we've talked about, man, serving is a great way. And not just because we work at the church and we want people to serve, but genuinely when you are around people who are doing things that you are also passionate about, you're going to connect with them and you're going to be in proximity again with people who have similar passions and interests. And just, I think that's such an easy way to step in, but you have to be free to be confident in who you are when you walk into those spaces. So if I felt this way in my early 20s too, of like, man, I can get myself into a room around other people, but if I'm so trapped by my own insecurity,
then you're up against the wall and you're not even engaging.
Yes. And so then I'm like, well, I'm an introvert, so I already am doing something I don't want to do. And you're like, I put myself out there, but I still feel isolated. Or even for the extroverts out there who I'm like, I'm around people all the time and I still feel alone.
Yeah, that's so good. So it's almost like the starting place is sometimes internal, sometimes spiritual, but it doesn't just stay there.
Right.
It's like there's choices. I love what you said. It's like, hey, sometimes like making a decision to serve, I think of just the idea of like, you have to be present. You have to show up to some places, whether it's church, whether it's group, whether it's serving. Yeah. Like sometimes just showing up is half the battle.
Yeah.
And being present. And then I talk a lot about intentionality. Like, what do you think, what is wisdom for someone who, man, they're young, they're new, they're not connected, and they're like, okay, I got to show up, I got to go somewhere, and then they're present. But what do you think intentionality looks like when they're present, maybe with people who they don't know super well, and they know they need to make intentional steps? What would you say are some of those intentional steps?
I think even something as simple as when you walk into a room, sometimes you want somebody to be the person to come up to you and ask you questions and be the person who seeks you out, and just asking the Lord to say, hey, help me be that person for someone else. And I think we have this mentality of, if I'm the new one, then I can't be hospitable, maybe,
I've used the language, we're sometimes more expectant than we are intentional. And I think we have to make a shift where our expectancy of others starts to diminish and our intentionality towards others starts to increase.
Yeah, like,
and
how can we contribute? How can we give?
And I can think of people like who are a part of our church, they show up, they introduce themselves to me. They're like, hi, I'm here for the first time. And man, that's a great first move. And then I see them shaking hands with other people. Yeah. Like, without a doubt, in a couple weeks, I'll see them walk into one of our spaces and people will know their names. And man, I just think that intentionality is so, so important. What would you say about this? I'm often finding for people to move from like lonely to connected, there's this element of patience. How would you say like we have to be people of patience as we're intentional with this? What role does patience play in just feeling connected over time?
Yeah, I think especially if you're a person who you have had friendships that have been long lasting, like say you have childhood friends and then you move to a new city and it's like, man, the only friends I've had for a long time. There's a level of, it has to be okay to be around people who are completely different than you. And to not count out, I think this applies to so many areas, but to not show up to a serving team or to a group or to an event and being like, you know what, I just didn't vibe with the people. And like, we don't have the same, like, we just don't have the same, we didn't connect. There wasn't that natural chemistry or connection right away. And it's like, cool, I get that. And I've been there, but can we have the patience and the curiosity to get to know people beyond just the initial stuff.
Yeah. It's like, look less for the vibe that we don't know what it is, but we know it when we feel it, and more just have an expectation of it might take some time. Yeah. Something I've learned recently, and I've shared this with some people, I think the young adult season of life is this shift from when you're younger, you have this expectancy around everything's supposed to happen in hours and days. Like a couple hours with people. Or a couple days of being with them. Like, shouldn't have all the things I want happened? And then there's a shift in life where your expectation, it's more about weeks and months. And sometimes you have to be patient enough to go, hey, I need to give this multiple weeks.
Yeah.
I need to give this some months. And so I'll say to people in college age all the time, hey, week 7 is going to be so much better for you than week 2.
Yeah.
Hey, be patient. Give it some time. So I think patience is a really, really big thing.
Yeah.
Moving from lonely, I don't know
Yes.
anyone, to, okay, here I am, I showed up, I got to be intentional,
Yeah.
and then time passes.
Yeah. And be
So,
willing to let people get to know you also.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're a naturally more guarded person, you're like, well, I got to really feel trust and I really got to feel all these things. And it's like, yes, that's important. But also, how can I know my generation really values authenticity and vulnerability. And it's like, this is a really great space and time in our life to practice that.
Yeah.
In new environments even.
Yeah. I see people being sometimes so vulnerable, there's no wisdom.
Yeah.
And then sometimes so quote unquote wise, I'm not trusting anybody.
Yeah.
And so we'll sometimes talk about, man, at this intersection of like your willingness to be vulnerable, but also having some wisdom to know that you probably shouldn't give everything to everybody all the time, but you should be patient to go, man, this person has shown that they love the Lord, they love people, and I want to open up with them.
Yeah.
So I've seen that be a factor too.
Yeah, for sure.
So what about this? I think like young people, myself included, I'm not immune from this, like where we have culture right now and the kind of the stream of culture pulling particularly young adults in a direction of, hey, value this, love this, be all about this. And then there's Christ saying, hey, I want you. And I think we're in a unique spot where we're like walking with and discipling young adults who they want to follow Jesus. They want to be faithful to Jesus, but culture is pulling them in another direction. And so what sort of wisdom for a young person who's like, man, I want to follow Jesus, but there's so many things that culture is pulling me towards.
Yeah.
What do we have for them?
Honestly, I from the time I was 21 to 24, I feel like I just lived in Proverbs because I was like, I have no wisdom. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, what the plan is. I have no plan. And I just think it's true. I think even good things like the redeeming sides of social media or even things like podcasts or whatever, there's so many perspectives. And I just wanted the Lord's wisdom so bad because it's so hard to know even when people you love and trust are saying different things too. And so I know it sounds cliche, but truly getting to the place where you're like, God, when I don't know or when I'm conflicted or when I'm confused or even doubtful about something, like show yourself to me in this. And really spending time in the life of Jesus in the Gospels and not just knowing stories. I think we can be good at sometimes knowing this stuff, but really observing and seeing how did he respond to the world around him. So it's not just, man, I know stuff that happened in his life, but it's like, no, I know the heart that he's going into situations with. And I think that gives so much freedom to just be like, I don't know the answers to everything, but also like Jesus showed us what he's like. And so we can lean on that. And even in things that can feel really ambiguous, that there's not always a super clear answer for it. And I think there's freedom in that too. And being like, you know what, I may never get that super clear answer.
Sure.
But I can have confidence in the nature of God.
Yeah. And I think the ways of culture are appealing when we're lonely.
Yeah.
And whenever we feel empty in a number of ways, right? Like I don't have purpose in my life or, that's when these things that social media kind of beckon us towards or like, you know, what kind of culturally the dating kind of scene looks like, right? You know, that's when I think we're really tempted to go, man, I don't know if the way of Jesus is working because look at myself. So I tend to think in terms of like, man, where are you planted relationally? Because that's going to provide so much of people in your life who are going, hey, we're chasing Jesus and we're not alone in this. And so, I've found for people like the way of culture, secular culture, and all the trappings that come along with that is absolutely appealing when we find ourselves separate from God's people, and not filling our hearts with the words that Jesus would want us to hear. I remember a friend one time, the expression ugliest sin, and someone used that, and she said, I don't know, sin is sometimes not ugly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it looks really, really good.
Right.
And I think it especially does whenever our mind is not inundated with the words of Christ, but rather think about media and entertainment.
Yeah.
I'm susceptible to this.
Yeah.
When all I care about is football and statistics and teams that are winning and losing, man, my heart just gets filled with that.
Yeah.
I know I need more of the voice of Jesus and the voice of his people in my life.
Yeah.
So what do you see young people often are being drawn to? Like followers of Jesus, but they're still drawn to these other things that are not the way of Jesus. What do you often see?
I feel like the most common thing is just living into the pressures of the world of, man, I have to have this by this age, or I have to be here at this point, or, what do I have in my life? And I feel like maybe for my generation, it doesn't feel necessarily materialistic, like the car you drive or the money you have. It feels more like what your life is filled with.
Yeah.
Do I have the boyfriend or the girlfriend? Do I have, success in other ways? And am I, maybe not even success, but what are people's perceptions of me in the world? And I think that's where social media, it makes it so hard because you're competing and comparing against false realities all the time.
Yeah.
And it reinforces that, oh yeah, I'm behind. And I think the isolation and the feeling behind is something that really paralyzes people and makes them feel shame and makes them feel like, well, I can't really tell people how I feel or where I'm at.
Yeah. And it is the cycle of the comparison game.
Yeah.
Whether it's
which
with
you can
peers.
never win.
No, it's a losing
you'll
game.
You'll never win. Yeah.
Because even in my own life, it's there's two conclusions to comparison: either shame or pride. Because if I compare, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
And then I end up prideful. Or I compare myself and I fall short, and then I feel lesser.
Yeah.
But so much of life is hey, if you want to know who you are, compare yourself to others.
Yeah.
But it is a losing game.
Yeah.
You talked about dating and how often that can be something that young people are man, do I have value?
Yeah.
And I look to this kind of aspect of life to determine that. And so I get a lot of conversations with a lot of people that are just, they sometimes don't even know how to ask it. Those. They're just I don't know. I need help with this.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like you have a lot of conversations with young people, where they're just seeking wisdom as it pertains to dating and or singleness and or future marriage?
Yeah.
Is that frequent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's very, and it's genuine. It's not silly.
Yeah.
I just want to say that it's not silly to care about that or to be thinking about it. I think I get a lot of where they at,
Sure.
Where are the people?
Yeah.
I think I get a lot of, what's wrong with me? Or, I feel like it's the pressure thing again. And I think we've talked about this before too, where, I, being single in my early 20s out of school, there was immense pressure to just find whoever loves Jesus and make it work.
Yeah.
And
that guy's reading his Bible.
Yeah. You're that counts. And it's I had a friend, I stole this from her. I use it all the time. And in reference to dating, she's always will it further the kingdom and bring much joy? And if it does those two things, hey, give it a try.
Yeah.
And in wisdom, in community. But I think sometimes we get so fixated on, does it fill my need in the moment?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
That we compromise and we kind of waste our time sometimes.
Yeah. I've heard the question asked, it's man, what are the bad reasons to pursue someone in dating? And then what might be the good ones?
Right.
So what come to mind for me, bad reasons would be, I just feel lonely, so I need someone.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that culture offers. Even Christian culture. You'll hear someone kind of misuse scripture. It's you were not made to be alone.
Yeah.
Therefore find someone, right? And they're I gotta find someone. I was not made to be alone. So that's a bad reason. What are some other that come to mind, perhaps? Bad reasons for a person to go, I
Reasons.
gotta be finding someone? Like, or things that you would
Yeah.
just caution. Like, if this is your motivation,
Yes.
I know one is just, I'm lonely and I
Yes,
don't
I'm
want
alone.
to be lonely. Maybe
Yeah.
another could be, man, I know like society looks upon me as lesser if I am single.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be seen
Yeah.
as
Like, where's my place?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the church is at fault for that, right? Where it's like you look at a church, it's like, look at all these things we have for families, husbands, wives, and their children. And then a person who doesn't have a significant other is like, well, what is for me?
Yeah.
And so then they can be driven by insecurity towards like trying to find someone.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be in that other category.
That would be my biggest caution is this going to be your source of validation?
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be the thing that says, all right, you're enough? Is that what you're looking for? And it doesn't matter. Like, you know, you could be with the best partner ever. And if that is the motivation, that person's never going to live up to that because they weren't meant to.
No.
And so it's not just, it's honoring another person enough to not put that on them. Like that's the Lord's seat.
Yeah.
To remind you, like, hey, this is you're mine, and this is your value, and I think it goes back to the freedom of like when you know who you are in God, there's a freedom and a grace to enter into relationships of any kind and kind of figure it out, and it doesn't have to be so scary and so heavy, you know. Like we've talked about that too, where it's, you know, sometimes you see two awesome Christian people getting together, and it's like, but do you even like spending time together? Do you have fun together? Do you enjoy seeing each other? Like God wants to further his kingdom, and he wants to give you joy too. Yeah. And you don't have to sacrifice one for the other all the time, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. Like you said it earlier, and I love that. You said, hey, for some people, like it can be a noble and a good thing to desire this. Yeah. But then you also said, like, sometimes they're like, where are the people at? Yeah. Like, and so I find myself sometimes in conversations where they're like, man, I really feel like I'm in a season. God's done a really good work in me, but I do have this desire to be in a relationship that moves towards marriage. But then they go, what do I do? Yeah. Like, where are the people? What are the wise, best practices for me to even find someone? And so I'm often in those conversations. So like, what would you say are just some of the just the wise ways for people to operate? Yeah. I have a desire to meet somebody. Yeah. How do I do that? Like, what are some good things that they can do? What do you think?
Serve in your local church.
Heck yeah.
And not just because we need volunteers, but because the things, we've talked about this so many times, of you learn so much about a person, even in friendship, when you're serving alongside someone. Like, are they patient? Are they kind?
Yeah.
When it's a rough day in children's ministry, do they show up with loving kindness, and are they respectful and reliable? And you learn a lot in that. Now, I'm not saying you should just serve in order to find a man or find a woman.
Where they at?
No,
where they at?
But I think it is totally okay if you are a single person who desires to be with someone. A really good place to look for that kind of person is going to be in your church, and is going to be, hopefully people who have similar passions and vision for their life. Like it's not just who can I spend time with that I might love. It's, man, I want my life to be in alignment on the same mission with someone. And you just learn so much. So for me, serving is like, it's a huge place. And I've just seen it happen a lot. Like,
sure.
it just happens.
Yeah. I think there's just this wise principle of like, go where the people will most likely be who have like the value and the conviction that is a church, and to serve others. Like, I think in terms of like someone who's, they're a fan of a particular sports team. Well, if you go and watch that team, chances are a lot of the people that are there are going to be fans of that team too. And so if you want someone whose life is about Jesus, where might Jesus people be? Well, they'll probably be at church because they love the bride of Christ. And then take that further. Well, they might go, man, I am so affected by what Christ has done in my life. I want him to use me in someone else's life. Okay, so I want to serve other people. So then you see them pouring into other people.
Yeah.
And those are the type of choices that are Christ first.
Yeah.
And then his church that leads someone to a place where they may look around and go, there's some pretty incredible people around me. And they start out as perhaps a brother in Christ before they're boyfriend material, or a sister in Christ before they're just, girlfriend material.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
What else? What is some other wisdom? Like I'm thinking of like the times that people may come to us and go, man, how do I navigate this well?
Yeah.
What's some other general wisdom for someone who's like, man, I'm single, but I want to move in that direction. What are some other things that might come to mind for you, just to be helpful?
Yeah, again, talk to the Lord about it. Tell him what you want. Tell him where your heart is at in this thing. I think the more we can be real with the Lord, the more work he can do in our hearts to just transform us all the time.
Yeah.
And not just for the sake of being a good partner, but for the sake of being formed into the image of Christ. Yeah. And I think one of the greatest gifts that I've had and have in my life are people who have been faithful to the Lord for so many years. Like finding people with wisdom from life experience who are much older than you, who have different experiences, and with discernment saying, hey, will you just know that you have the authority to speak into my life? And like, hey, will you pray for this thing that I'm also praying about? Like, would you, like, just giving permission to people you trust in your life who are further down the road than you to be able to speak in and to be able to, like, intercede for you even in those things. That has been such a help and so freeing. Like, a lot of the anxieties about, like, man, am I going to do the wrong thing? Or, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, a lot of that gets relieved when I know I'm surrounded by wiser people who will help me walk through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also something too, and you said this, like, look inward, like, what does God have for you? I think if we sometimes let even Christian culture can dictate, like, you are supposed to be married. And so someone can go, I guess I'm supposed to be looking for this. But they might actually have a unique calling that God would call them to do something from singleness that's incredible, and he'll fill their life with great things, but they're letting kind of social pressure from kind of Christian culture dictate what they think they have to do. But I've also seen this, because there's been kind of like a movement against that. Like, the church values marriage too much, and I think it has, that sometimes people have then put a resistance to that, and they're afraid to admit, even to themselves, that they desire that. Yeah. And so, like, I've seen time and time again that that's a piece where it's like, hey, if you feel like singleness is what God has for you, that's incredible. He will use that. If you feel like marriage is what God has for you, that can be an incredible thing too. Yeah. And so sometimes they just need, like, man, go to the Lord, find from him just that place of peace of what he has for you, and then just be honest with yourself. Yeah. Be honest with your community and see what God has for you.
And being willing, no matter what, I think this is the thing, is no matter what you feel like is for you, trusting who God is enough to say, but I'll lay that down too. Like, I'll lay down whatever. I'll lay down my whole life. I'll lay down whatever it is that my vision of my life is supposed to be. Like, I trust you enough to do what you want with that, while also being real about what you desire too, because he cares about that.
Yeah. What could we say to the person who, man, they have been praying, God, I want someone, like, and I want to honor you in a relationship, but they just they're not going on dates. They don't feel like there's anybody in their community, and they're just discouraged. Yeah. Like, they find themselves in singleness and it's not what they want, and they are so discouraged. Like, what does encouragement look like for someone who's in a spot like that, in a season like that? What do you think? Well,
everybody is so different in what they need, and that I do think just know, we care about that. And that's not a silly thing. Yeah. And God cares about that. And if you're grieving that, he cares. and he's with you in that. And that the world is bigger than the bubble of options that you can see. Like God has done and continues to do incredible things. And if we can trust him in doing miracles, we can trust him to bring the right person at the right time. And to know, like, good friends will pray for you with that and for that.
Yeah. I tend to encourage people in that, like, don't keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
And you kind of said that just now, like, who are the people, whether they are the mentors and pastors in your life, whether they are your community, be vulnerable in that moment. I think learning to cry out to the Lord when we have those things. Lord, I don't like my circumstances. And I don't even want these things to be. So Lord, what do you have for me in the future? We can let the Lord know, this is what I'm praying for. And he does care. And he does see us. Brianna, this was really good.
Yeah, it was fun.
I enjoyed this, and I hope it was encouraging. And this is not like a one-time conversation. Like, this is what we do, like in our spaces with our people. And so you're at South Lou. Like, what do you guys do? Give a shout out. Tell them how they can get connected.
Yeah, if you come down to South Lou, we get together on Thursday nights, 8 o'clock, and you can kind of stay up to date if you follow us at South Lou Camp on Instagram. Yeah,
and in Blanket Baker, we do Monday nights. Our people show up at 6 o'clock, and we'd love for you to be connected. Instagram is Southeast Cam. You can DM us. We'll help you with next steps. But hey, we love you guys.
Yeah.
This was awesome.
Yeah,
see you.